Start a Therapy Practice podcast, episode number, hold on. There it is, 86.
Scott Harmon, StartATherapyPractice.com podcast.
Hello there, my friend. How are you doing today? This is Scott Harmon, StartATherapyPractice.com. So glad you're joining me today. Today we get to visit with Jeremy Sutton, physical therapist. He has his own podcast called ServantPT and his own private practice, and it's called ServantPT. Now, you've heard me mention before other therapists, and I'm like, hey, this guy, this gal, they have the heart of a servant. Now, obviously, Jeremy has the heart of a servant. It's right there in his name, ServantPT. He really does have the heart of a servant, and I really enjoyed visiting with him today. Now, go over to startatherapypractice.com/86, and I'll have links where you can get in touch with Jeremy, or you can just search for him. He's everywhere. You need to follow him on Facebook, ServantPT. You also need to follow him on Instagram. Guess what it is? ServantPT. And I'll put links in the show notes, startatherapypractice.com/86. And be sure to connect with Jeremy. He's just a friendly, open guy. I really enjoyed visiting with him. Now, if you have not checked out my free stuff over at startatherapypractice.com, be sure to do so. I have some free forms, I have some free tools, and you can listen to all the past episodes of the podcast over there at startatherapypractice.com. All right, let's get with the interview with Jeremy Sutton. Here we go. Hey there, Jeremy. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. How are you, man?
Oh, man, I'm good. It's Friday, and it's a beautiful day outside. You're in Louisiana. Is it kind of cool down there?
Today, it's about 50 degrees, so it's after about 5 months of 112 degree with humidity, seems like. So I'm happy it's cool today.
Yes. So you're in Vivian, and that's the name of your private practice. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. I bought it as Vivian Physical Therapy Incorporated, and that's still the name of my S-Corp, but my doing business name is now ServantPT, and I'm in the process of changing out all the signage and everything, but pretty much everything I do from here forward is under the name of ServantPT.
Oh, I like that better. That's cool. That's a cool name, and that's the name of your podcast also. I want to get a little bit of background information just to let people know who you are, what you're about, who are not familiar with you. So you're in private practice now. I'd like for you to tell us that little bit of that story of you're at a PT school, or maybe you're in PT school and you want to do private practice. What did that look like to get you into private practice?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, so to kind of go back a little bit further, I didn't get into physical therapy school the first time around. I had a 3.1 GPA, and so I kind of had some, kind of a hard story to begin with. But I worked at an outpatient physical therapy clinic throughout college. We saw about 100 people a day on Monday, Wednesday, Friday there. It was just a really busy place. Just fell in love with it. Always wanted to have private practice and, get to PT school, and same old story, reimbursements down. You can't open a private practice in this climate, whatever people tell you. And so got out of school, went to work at at Health South actually, and then my wife and I got married. I moved about an hour away from that location. Started at a private practice very similar to the one I now own, and really enjoyed that. Left there, went to another hospital, and worked an outpatient for 5 years, and just really kind of started to get burnt out, and didn't really enjoy physical therapy anymore. An opportunity came up to buy the clinic that I have now. And initially I said no, and started praying about it, talking to my wife about it. And God just really opened up a lot of doors and started to show us that that's what he wanted us to do. And so bought this clinic, and immediately the very first day I worked here, I worked for a week with the owner that had it. And he said, come up here and see if you like it. Within the first hour of being here, I immediately fell in love with physical therapy again, and just haven't looked back. And I worked for the previous owner for about a year while I had to do a small business loan and getting all the details of that ironed out. And then I've owned it for 2.5 years now. And it's been a a wild ride, but I've loved it, and I would never ever want to go back to working for somebody else.
Hmm. I'm curious. Some people start up just like you did. They'll buy into a practice, and some people will just kind of start from scratch. What are your takes on that from either or?
Well, I thought about you asking me that question this morning on the way here, and I would never do again what I did the first time. I don't think I would ever want to buy another practice. I would prefer to start from scratch, and the reason is, so I had to go through a small business loan. I had to do all that. It took a very long time to do that, and I bought an existing practice. And I love my practice, and I want people to know that for a fact. I feel like this is where God wants me, but I would have preferred to just open my own clinic mainly because of the finances, and if I would have met Greg Todd, Aaron LeBauer, Paul Goff, some of those guys before I did, a year before I did, then I would have probably just started my own thing, in a 24-hour fitness gym or something like that, just rented a room from somebody to start out with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I've told everybody that I've talked to, whether it be on podcasts or in person, young PT starting out. Look, just find you a place to rent a room to start out and build it from there, and don't go into debt.
Yes. Yeah. I call it the food truck mentality. These food trucks out there, they're not paying rent or buying a place that's huge. They're starting a food truck. We need to use that same mentality, at least to have that option of like, okay, how can I start, from scratch in a very small way and build from there? But the lesson that you've learned is so beneficial to others. I know it's
Yeah.
In hindsight's 2020, but I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. My wife and I really have talked, and this was actually her idea. My wife stays home with our kids. She's a medical technologist. She worked for 7.5 years in a lab doing that, and she's been home with our kids for 6. But she said one of the things she would like us to do later in life is mentor young people, whether it be PTs or dentists or doctors, OTs, or whatever it is, and just say, hey, look, these are the mistakes we made buying a business. This is what it cost us. And, we overcame it, but this is how you can do it better, easier, and with less money. And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to doing, probably not in the distant future. So
Great. What a great way to give back, to try to help people in that fresh mode right there.
Yeah.
I do. Before I forget, I want to say that I appreciate you expressing your faith in God through everything you do. I mean, I think that's kind of the whole theme of your podcast, of your business, is ServantPT, being a servant of God, being a servant of Christ. I think that you really express that well, and I appreciate, as a fellow believer, I really appreciate you putting yourself out there like that. I know that not everybody does that, but you're a good example, I think.
Yeah, Scott, I really appreciate, we as Christians, or as a Christian, I struggle sometimes with being a Christian business owner or a business owner that is a Christian. And, it's not two different things, but it is. But my initial logo, my roommate from PT school designed, it's a heart with a cross in it. And I said, I want everybody to know that my business is about Christ. And now the ServantPT logo is actually a tribal Jesus tattoo that I was able to track down the designer of out in California with the help from a great friend of mine, Avery and Kara Schroyer, and ask him if I could use his tattoo for my logo. And he graciously allowed me to do that. So, that's what I want my life to be, is about Christ. And, I'm a big time mess up all the time, but, I want to live for him, and I want people to know that's what I stand for. And then I hopefully don't mess up more than I do, and can be a beacon of hope for people.
Well, you're a beacon of hope for me. I appreciate you putting yourself out there like that. I know that, like you said, sometimes that's, should I say that? Should I do that? But yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, man. That's great.
I just go ahead and do it, Scott, and then accept the consequences later. I have chronic foot and mouth disease, and my wife has diagnosed me with that. So, but you know what, man, like, to be honest with you, to go into that just a little bit deeper, and then I'll let you move on. But we have a ton of friends that are not Christians, have a ton of friends that don't agree with anything I say or do on that aspect. And I don't agree with things that they do. And I was really worried about that, branching out. And and now going to a lot of conferences and meeting a lot of people on social media and in person. But the thing that I have found is that people respect that I'm that way 100% of the time. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I always stand for what I stand for. And I appreciate even the people that I don't agree with, whether it's religious or social or whatever issues, being who they are, all the time. And so in that way, we're able to coexist and enjoy each other's company. And, it's I stand for what I stand for. You stand for what you stand for. And we can agree to disagree a lot of times,
Exactly. Well, I think people do not get as offended as the media would like us to think that they are.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
especially therapists, I think therapists are pretty open-minded, or at least, they'll listen to what you have to say. They might not necessarily agree with you, but I don't find people that offended usually.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think it's a lot of it is made to look a lot worse than it is, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm curious, going to kind of staying on that theme, when you said when you first were looking at buying your practice, you talked to your wife and you both prayed about it. I'm curious what kind of support or what things your wife brought up that you might not have necessarily thought about.
Oh man, I don't even know. It's been so long. No. Well, so it was kind of tricky. So we bought the clinic from a guy who was at our church, and the way I met him, I knew who he was. And the way I met him is we were both going through a process to be licensed pastors at our church. And so that's how we met. So it kind of made it a little tricky on the, business side of it, because we had a relationship beforehand. And that's another thing I would, talk to other people about, is to realize that business is business. And, you need to be honest and forthright with things, but you need to know that it's business and you need to take care of your family. But, she would just ask. My wife's not a risk taker. And we just had this conversation last night. She wants to know what the steps are from A to Z. And you just tell me A, and I really don't even have to know Z a lot of times, and I'll just go ahead and run with it. So, she just wanted to make sure the finances, everything worked out how it's supposed to. We checked and made sure, that there was an actual business to buy, and it wasn't just somebody trying to get out of, something. And, we really did a lot of due diligence, and my mother-in-law is the president of a credit union. And so she looked over the financial aspects of it. And then we had a CPA that works for my mother-in-law, and my mother-in-law's family, they have several businesses. And so this man had been their CPA for years. And so he looked through the finances with us, and, we asked every question we knew to ask. The problem is that neither one of us knew all the right questions to ask, which I don't guess you ever could really. But, she was just really wanting to make sure that it was an actual business that we were buying, and not just somebody trying to get out of something that they didn't want to do anymore. So she was very, very helpful in that, very supportive. And then also, Scott, my wife is not a physical therapist. She's not a business owner. And, she recognized that, and she would say, I'll agree, or I'll basically respect your wishes and your opinions on the physical therapy side of things. So it was a really good process for us to go through. We had only been, I guess we had been married 5 years when this started. So went through that. It was a good marriage building exercise.
Well, you had great support. I mean, that just the communication there alone. I'm sure your marriage grew from that experience. It's kind of like building a house, together. You grow through that experience and kind of test some things and come out on the other side.
Yes. And we had gone through. I'm the spender in our house, and she's the saver, and so we had gone through Dave Ramsey's course beforehand, and that really helped put us on the same page. But I don't know I think if we hadn't gone through that course, it would have been a little bit different. But she still was very supportive, and we have a really good relationship, so that helps.
It sounds like a similar setup at my house. My wife is more in the details and would want to know the things that your wife wanted to know. And my wife stays at home with our kids also. So it's a very similar setup, but which takes me to the point of, you have designed not only your practice, but your life to have that as a goal, it sounds like, to have your wife at home with the kids in order to give them that nourishment and to have that lifestyle. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in very modest, we actually lived in a log cabin for a little while with holes in the floor, no telephone when I was a kid. And my parents both worked very hard and awesome people, but we were in the lower middle class, if not the, upper lower class. But I always thought that people whose wives stayed at home had plenty of money. And what I realized was, no, they just do without a lot of things and just save. And so my wife being a med tech, we were fortunate enough to be able to save one of her paychecks per month. And then I did home health. I worked 40 hours at the outpatient clinic, and then I did home health at lunch and after work almost every day for about 7 to 8 months. And we were able to save enough money. I think we saved about it wasn't a lot in the grand scheme of things, about between $7,000 and $9,000. But we also paid off about $22,000 worth of debt with the Dave Ramsey stuff that we were doing. So we really were in like about a $30,000 bubble, and we lived off of that money for the first year that she was off. And then we're able to make a lot of things happen and didn't have any car loans and things like that. So it just really worked out. We really designed what we wanted, and we have an amazing family that supports us and has helped us. And so, it has been by design, but there has been a lot of divine intervention that's helped us as well.
Well, I would venture to say that if you get no more richer monetarily, you are already rich, my friend.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. There's my little girl's 6, my little boy's 4. My girl is in first grade, and she made the A honor roll. We took them to Chick-fil-A yesterday and let them play and eat ice cream. And so, that's been the biggest blessing to me this really in my life, is to have 2 wonderfully healthy children. And they're just, man, I'm very fortunate. My wife is amazing, and she's just she works way harder than I do, and does a whole lot more than I do, and doesn't get paid nearly enough for what she does. But I'm very rich and very fortunate.
But down south, we call that out kicking our coverage when we overmarry like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely outkicked my coverage in every aspect.
Good for you. I'm curious about your name, ServantPT, for your practice and your podcast. Where'd that come from? And tell us a little bit of background. What's your purpose for that?
Oh man, I'm glad you asked. That's my favorite thing to talk about. So my background personally is I had a very bad temper. My dad had a bad temper when I was growing up, and I just learned to deal with things by screaming and yelling and throwing. My dad wasn't abusive, but he just had a bad temper, and he was 21 when I was born, and my mom was 18. So I think now all the time about, when I was 10, my dad was 31, and so I had my first kid when I was 30. And if I would have been dealing with the stuff that I dealt with in my 20s with a kid, I understand now my dad had a bad temper. But that's how I dealt with things. And it really caused me a lot of issues in life early on, and as a PT and as a married man. And so my wife and I kind of hit a breaking point where she just wouldn't, she's like, I'm not putting up with this. And we had decided as a family that we wouldn't raise our kids that way. But I just was kind of backing out on my agreement. And so, just being completely truthful, like I went to a friend's house, and he's like, I'll counsel you, but if you don't get right with God. And so basically I sat there in my truck that night and prayed, and I was like, I'm done with this. And I really did kind of a complete 180 that night. And it was even a physical, change, and people would see me later and say, my gosh, you look completely different. What happened? I was like, oh, I met Jesus. So, that's kind of what happened. And then I have a friend of mine who's a PT in South Louisiana, and he had talked to me about doing, like, maybe opening up a bank account with me and him and another guy, and just kind of saving and raising money to serve other people and buy, wheelchairs and walkers and things like that, build ramps. And, logistically that never really worked out, but I started to think about this ServantPT thing. And then really the catalyst to all of it was we had the former CEO of Tyson Foods came and spoke at our church one night. I can't remember his name now, but he spoke about being a servant leader. And I'd never heard the term servant leader before, which was it's odd to me now because I eat, sleep, and breathe that. But he talked about a servant leader. He gave about 7 tenets or, whatever that he talked about. And I remember looking at my wife that night and I said, I've lived the first 30 years of my life. Really, for me, I'd like to live the next 30 or 50 or however many I have left serving other people. And so that's where that came from. And I had the ServantPT name in my head for a long time. I wanted to do the podcast. I really didn't know how I was going to incorporate that. Talked to Greg Todd's one of my mentors, talked to him, and he said, why don't you interview other medical professionals around your area and, make your podcast basically about them. And I was like, oh, sounds great. So I started doing that. And the clinic was Vivian Physical Therapy Incorporated. And the previous owner was very much knows all the doctors in town, and has a good relationship with them. So I definitely didn't want to change it to like Sutton Physical Therapy or anything like that. But after being here for 2 years, I felt comfortable enough with changing the name to ServantPT because I now know most of these people and the people that come see me as patients speak highly enough of me. I felt comfortable changing that. So really everything that I do, I want to serve other people. And my verse for my company is Philippians 2:4. It says, look out not only for your own interests, but also for the interests of others. And I really think that's what Christians do. And I think that's what we as physical therapists, OT, speech therapists, that's what our profession is based on. It's just serving other people. So I just kind of wanted that to be my platform and people to know that that's what I want to do is serve others. And I want to serve them so much so that my name is ServantPT and everything I do is about servant leadership. So that's really where all that came from. And, I'm hoping it's going in a couple of directions now. And, I really want to be able to speak about that to whoever will listen to me. So that's where we're going with it.
That's I appreciate that testimony there. Sometimes when therapists, potential therapy clinic owners, practice owners ask me, Scott, what should I name my practice? And, some people will name it their name, whatever, Scott Harmon Therapy or, Harmon Therapy, whatever. But I always suggest to at least say what you do. And so my practice is therapy for kids. That's what we do. Your practice is ServantPT. That's what you do. I think that's a great example of just that. Say call it what you do. That's a great example. And it reminds you every day when you say it, you got to say it a few times, don't you? Oh, yeah. It's supposed to be serving.
Yes, I've had to say it a lot in the last few weeks. So, yeah, absolutely.
Great example. We've gotten this far in the podcast, but we didn't say who your client base is, who you serving.
Oh, man. So I help women 50 and over live a life full of health, family, and fun. That's my one-liner. So everything I do is based on women over 50. And I really never knew why until I had this big mastermind meeting in New Orleans back in February with 12 other PTs. And they're like, I was talking about my family and how I was raised and my mom, how selfless she was and how I always wanted to protect her and things like that. And they were like, oh, yeah, well, you're serving your mom. That's why you want 50 women 50 and over. So that's what I do, man. I told a patient this week and she said, well, something about changing business or doing something. And I said, well, I'll take that into consideration what you want because I'm here to serve women over 50. And if you think this would look better, then maybe I need to look into that and change it a little bit. So that's what I do.
That's great. How are women 50 and over finding you?
Man, they're finding me on Facebook. Facebook's really my biggest vehicle for getting my name out. And I've recently started doing lead form ads, and I've done those for about a month, and I've had 18 new leads come in from that in 1 month. And now I haven't converted all of those into paying patients, but definitely got that going. And I have an Instagram account. I have my podcast. Right now I'm in the middle of revamping my website. So it looks horrible, but it's going to be fixed by the end of the year, and it'll be ServantPT.com. There's nothing there right now, but pretty much Facebook. And then I go out. I've gone out to a church here locally and did a little seminar on low back pain and fall risk, things like that. So I try to be in the community as much as possible. I live 40 minutes away from my clinic, so we really probably won't move here anytime soon because of where our children go to school and because we have such an amazing family support system locally. But yeah, man, I'm just doing Facebook and my podcast, and I actually try to seek out other professionals that are serving women over 50. And so that's really what I've done with my podcast. And that seems to be, those are the episodes that get the most downloads and get the most attention. So I feel like I'm doing something right in that aspect. So, but yeah, Facebook's my biggest vehicle.
On Facebook, what do you find is working for you right now as far as the type of information you're putting out there?
The best thing that I found, so, I told you about the lead format. I've got several people there, but I actually have a women's group. It's called Southern Gems. It's for women over 50. I have 408 women in that group. And I believe about 300 of them are local, within the actual people that could come see me at the clinic within 30 miles of me. So I put some information in that group. If I'm being honest, I've neglected a little bit lately just because of the podcast and some things trying to get our business running a little smoother. But a lot of times the best interaction I get is when I ask a question. What would you like to see me do a video on? And somebody will say, well, I have neck pain, and I'll do a neck pain video. And then it just, people love it and like it and comment on it. Something that I actually did last October was challenged by a friend of mine, Alex Engar, and to do 30 days of content. And so I created, I think I did 25 or 27 exercise videos in October, and I posted one every day for people to get, fit. And it was all just body weight, things you could do at home. And that was a huge success. I gained a lot of followers on Facebook and got a lot of engaging interaction with people through that. So, I try to figure out what people want and then give that to them.
That I'm interested in that 30-day challenge. That sounds like fun. So do you think that was a combination of what you were putting out plus the consistency?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a consistency more than anything. And then I also use my kids. So when you have cute kids, you can do that. So, but yeah, I think the consistency and the content. And so basically, like I said, what I did was I polled my audience and said, what do you want? And so the first challenge I did for that one, I think I had 45 women in a private Facebook group doing a 30-day challenge. And I thought that was pretty good for my very first one. And now I have that group of 400, but it just, with that consistency, one thing I've learned is if you quit posting for about a week, people think you've stopped, and those aren't my words, but if you stop posting for a week or 2 weeks and then you come back and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to post, or life got busy or whatever. And then, well, people are just waiting for you to quit again. And so if you're not being consistent, and we all have issues, we all have things that, other things take priority, whether it be family or business or whatever it is, illness. But if you continually start and stop, then people just kind of fall off. And so I think being consistent is the number one thing. And then two is making sure, well, I would say one would be make sure you're putting out content people actually want. And then two, be very consistent with it.
That's a great tip. Yeah. I struggle with that as far as being consistent. I mean, I think I've got plenty of ideas, but the consistency, catches me. Just, life happens, get busy, family and my private practice. So I'm going to try to take that to heart. I appreciate the challenge.
Yeah, I'm challenging myself too. It's definitely, Scott, you understand, it's hard to do everything all the time. And, I've had two people ask me to do a couple groups and different things. And I've had to message both of them this week and say, look, I can't add anything else to what I'm doing. And I don't like doing that. I want to be involved in everybody and as much as I can, but sometimes we just can't do it all.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important point, is to know what to say no to and be empowered to say no to it, because I fall into the trap of being busy, but and maybe even productive, but not necessarily efficient. I can be doing important things, but it's not what I personally should be doing and can have the most impact on. So yeah, being able to say no to certain things really lets you say yes to really even more important things. That's an important lesson.
Yeah, I mean, just last night, my wife and I do our own billing, and we have Heno as our EMR, and then we mail out our own bills and do things like that. And I had printed them out a couple of nights ago, and I said, "Hey, I really need you to write the address on all these envelopes and stuff them and mail them for me because, I really need to be doing other things like actually billing out patients because you can't do that." And she was like, "Yeah, cool, I'll do it, no problem." But if we didn't have a good relationship or I didn't understand what you just said, then I would have taken another 20 or 30 minutes to do that when I could have been actually billing out things that she could mail out later. So we have to really understand exactly what you just said. Being busy doesn't mean you're being productive.
Yep. I'm learning that.
Yeah, me too. It's hard to learn. I want to do everything.
Yeah.
I want my prints to be on every single thing in our business, and I just can't do it all anymore.
Now you can't do it and grow. That's for sure.
Mm.
That's for sure. You said you used a Heno for your EMR. Did you use that from the get-go?
No, I didn't. I had another EMR that was here when I came, and I had a billing service that was here when I came. And I enjoyed the EMR. I did not enjoy the billing company. So we have since done gone in a different direction. And that's something that I'm very passionate about is if you have a billing company that's not on board with you, they really have you, you're really kind of a slave to that billing company, even though you own the business. The company I was using was in California and I'm in Louisiana. And so there's a time difference. And patients would come in and say, "Hey, how much do I owe you?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Let me call the billing company." Well, got to where they wouldn't answer, and then they wouldn't call me back. And, it just got to be a very unhealthy relationship. And, people were getting angry at me, rightfully so, because it's my business. But we just had to make a change there, and we've saved a ton of money. And I'm happier. People are happier. My wife's happier. So it's been a big thing.
Well, I often suggest to therapists if they're looking to outsource that to, maybe that's what you have to do right now. But if you don't have to, you should consider keeping that in house and figuring it out. Because if you can figure it out, then you can document it, pass it on to someone else, and you can save a ton of money down the road and not paying that percentage to the billing company.
Yeah, we've saved. Again, we were talking about this last night, Scott. We've saved at least $30,000 this year alone off of getting rid of the billing company and doing it ourselves.
Yep.
I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, and as you grow, if you think about that, it's exponential. It keeps growing as the amount that you save or the amount that you spend to the billing company.
Yeah.
And then that amount that you save, you potentially could hire somebody who not only does billing, but maybe they're sitting at the front desk some, or they're doing something different.
Absolutely. It's huge what you can do for your business when you're not spending that extra, in our case, $30,000. And that would grow because, if you know anything about business companies, they take a percentage. So the more money you make, the more money they make.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you're using Heno. Are you using an invoicing software?
I'm not. So, well, actually I am. We have, still have some old AR, accounts receivable from the other. And so I'm printing it off of that. But Heno actually allows you to print the statement from Heno. So it's all in one. It's really inexpensive. I've really enjoyed that aspect of it. And so it's a lot better for the small clinic. I was paying $300 a month base price for my EMR before. And Heno's a $155 a month with faxing capabilities, and they have very good customer service, and they integrate with Office Ally is what I do my billing with now.
Yep.
So it's really good. It's really simple.
Yeah, and that's reasonable. That's very reasonable.
It is. That's exactly right. It's reasonable. They're not gouging you, and like I said, they have good customer service. They're therapy owned. Katie Holman her and her husband started it. She's a physical therapist in Florida, so she understands the issues that we have.
I want to go back to your, you said you had a Facebook leads that you were doing. So what do you, first of all, I guess, define what you mean there and then what you're using for a lead.
Sure. So I've just set up a Facebook lead ad form. And so what I have done is it's a pain lead. And it's basically says, there's copy involved, and I have a picture of a lady smiling, probably in her 60s, and it says, have you recently been to your doctor and asked about pain? And they said, oh, you're just going to have to live with it, or here's another pill. Did they tell you have the body of an 80-year-old, go home and wait to die? It's not the exact copy, but that's the gist of it. And then it says, if you've heard all these things and you would like another option without taking more medicine and without just waiting, then, leave your information. And so it goes, this is all integrated with Facebook, and it goes to a form where you put in your first, last name, your email address, and your phone number. And so when they submit that, I actually have Zapier.com. So I have a Zap set up. When they submit their name, it sends me a text message on my phone, and then I call them. I try to call them immediately so I can get them on the phone. But that's how I've got it set up. And I've got right now, I think I've had right at 18 people sign up for that. And I've gotten 1, 2, 3 of them in the clinic. I have one scheduled to come in for free assessments. And I've done 2 evals already, and I have one more eval scheduled for Tuesday morning. So out of 18, I've had 4 come in and converted 3 into evals. So
that's awesome.
It was, and Scott, I think I was running a $4 a day ad the first day or first couple of weeks, and I've since upped it to $10 a day, which is a lot of money for me to be a small clinic. It'd be about $300 a month. But as of right now, I've already had, like I said, 2 evaluations, and I've gotten 4 visits out of that, and I have one more scheduled for Tuesday. So they've already, pretty much paid for the ad. So I'm very excited about it. It's something I just started, and I'm hoping it's going to continue to grow and to get bigger.
Yeah, as long as you're tracking the conversions and the dollar in to see how much dollar out you can get, you'll do great with that. I think it's a good idea to try to have that conversation instead of, here, I'll send you this free thing. To have that conversation is powerful.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing is, Scott, is that when I get on the phone with them, I don't want people to think it's all roses, because I actually had one scheduled for today that didn't show up, and I immediately called and couldn't leave a message. So I'll send her a text when we get off this podcast. But I tell them I have 2 ebooks printed out for them. I have the book that I wrote on neck pain. It's about a 25-page book, and I have a pyramid to show them where they are, injured or injury-free or tentative roller coaster, whatever you want to call it. And then I have a roadmap that I sit down and write out the 4 phases of therapy that I'm going to take them through, and what we're going to do and how we're going to get there and how long it's going to take. And so I tell all of them that all on the first phone call. And so I hand them this package when they come in. I talk to them for 15 minutes. I pray for them before they leave if they want me to. And then I also put them into MailChimp, into an email drip. And so I had one for fall risk and pain, and I've decided to just convert it all into the pain one. But I've got, 18 people on that email drip. They've all gotten an email every week since they've signed up. And so I will continually give them free information, until either my MailChimp account doesn't work, or I, retire or whatever. And so, now that they're in that system, they will continue to be in it. And, I'll just continue to serve them, and hopefully one day they'll, want to be a patient, or,
that's awesome. And that comes back to the consistency too.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be consistent. And the problem is there's just so much time in a day, and this, you can only do so much. And the best thing that I've done lately is I got an intern that's a pre-PT student. He's actually in Alaska, and he's going to be editing my podcast. I'm going to probably edit about 2 more episodes, hopefully, and then never touch the editing side again. And then he's going to do my social media accounts and all that. So that's made a big difference for me as well. It's mainly from a peace of mind, but also in a time thing. I don't have to spend, hours editing and creating content anymore. I'll tell him what I want, and he'll do it for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What I'm curious what podcast you're listening to.
Oh man, my favorite one right now is Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand. And I've listened to almost every episode. He talks about how to make your customer the hero of the story, and how we're not the hero of the story. We're the guide. And it's really groundbreaking, because most people want to be the hero. And so, but everybody wants to be the hero. So if you can be the guide, then there's a place for you in that story. That's my favorite. Of course, I listen to Paul Goff, I listen to Greg Todd, and I listen to Jared Carter was the first podcast I ever listened to. And but another non-PT one I like is Entree Leadership with Dave Ramsey Group. And then Chandler Bolt is one I've been listening to a lot of because he teaches you how to self-publish a book, how to write it, all that kind of stuff. And so that's really kind of my next phase of things is I wrote this neck book, and I'm going to write one for the back, shoulder, hip, knee, elbow, and kind of have a package deal to give to patients when they come so I can serve them better.
Mm-hmm. I took a Chandler Bolt. He was offering some sort of course it was a pretty good discount, and I took it. I haven't made any action on it yet, although I have an ebook, but I wrote the ebook before I went through Chandler's stuff. It was good stuff.
Right. Yeah, I've really enjoyed his content, and he's got a lot of big name people. I mean, he's interviewed Gary Vee, he's interviewed Michael Hyatt. I think John Maxwell might have been on there. So it's a lot of good content, and it's funny because when I listen to all these business podcasts, you usually end up listening to the same people on each podcast, but they tell everything just a little bit differently. And I can't. I listen to so many podcasts. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I love it because I don't have time to sit down and read.
Yep. I can't get enough. And Michael Hyatt has a great podcast too.
Yes. And I've listened to his before. And it's funny because I go through phases of listening to whenever Paul Goff's podcast came out, I listened to that all the time. And then I listened to an episode yesterday, was the first time I'd listened to it in months. And, I'll go through phases of listening to different people, and there's just so much information out there. It's hard to stay consistent with all of them.
There it is, that consistency word.
Yeah, they're consistent. There you go. It's everywhere.
I think we tend to binge. I do anyway. I don't have Netflix, but if I had it, I'd probably binge watch, certain episodes, certain programs.
Yes.
I binge listen to certain podcasts.
Yes.
Programs.
Yes, I had to drive to New Orleans, drove to CSM, and I live about 6 hours from there in North Louisiana. And it was the happiest day of my life in a long time because I listened to about 20 podcast episodes on the way down there because I listened to them all on about 1.5 speed. So my wife called. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm listening to all these podcasts. I'll talk to you later."
Sounds like me.
Yeah, she thinks
great though. You could learn a ton. There's so much, like you said, there's so much information out there.
Yeah, and we probably absorb about 1% of it. Or I do, and so I just feel like I need to listen to more and more and more and more and more.
Exactly, Jeremy. We're going to have to end this here in just a minute, but I'd like for you to give some advice, some suggestions to therapists out there who are like, you know what, I'd like to have a private practice one day. What would you suggest they start thinking about, looking at, doing right now?
Well, first off, I would think you need to see if it's something that your area will support. I told a guy one time, just because we want to do something doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I've been in that situation many times before where I wanted to do something, but it doesn't happen because I didn't have the skill or the opportunity or whatever. But, just be confident in your PT skills, but know that running a business is completely different than being a PT. But you don't have to be a 20-year physical therapist out of school to start a practice. I was 5 years out when I bought this PT clinic, and I had to learn a lot about business, but it's not anything you can't learn. You just have to have the right mentors, the right mentality. Just know that if that's your desire, then aim yourself towards that and just keep moving forward. And there's going to be days where you feel like you can't move forward, but if you just plant your feet firmly in the ground and don't back up and don't give up, then, you can, within a day or two, you can start moving forward again. And, but, I guess maybe the most important thing would be seek out people that know more about what you want to do than you do, and just, listen to them and make wise decisions. And, it's business is tough, but it's really not rocket science. If you're, like you said, we use that word again, consistency. If you're just consistent and you show up every day and you keep moving towards your goals, you can do it. I get so tired of people saying you have to be out 20 years or you have to go get some experience first. And there's so many examples of people that we know in PT and other professions that started right out of school and are very successful. So, if that's what you want to do it, and just know that it's going to be hard work, but I would rather work hard in something I love than work hard in something I hate. So
Excellent.
That's what I would say.
That's very good advice. Very good advice. Well, Jeremy, if people wanted to track you down and follow you and see what you're up to, what's the best way?
You can always friend request me on Facebook, Jeremy Sutton, Sutton. My business page is ServantPT, and my podcast is at the ServantPT podcast, and then on Instagram, ServantPT, Servant_PT. So that's where I am. I tell people, if you can't find me, you're not looking. My cell phone is 318-278-0330. Call me if you want to. I'll talk to you. And like I said, if you can't find me, you're not looking.
Well, I appreciate it so much, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, man, it was awesome. Thank you, Scott. And I really appreciate what you're doing, and just humbled and appreciative that you would ask me to be on your podcast. I really appreciate it.
Oh, man, I really enjoyed visiting with Jeremy. We have a lot of similarities in our approach to life, our faith, and just how we want to set up our practice to serve others. And I think you're the same way. That's why you're listening to this podcast. So be sure to connect with Jeremy on Facebook, on Instagram. Just search ServantPT. Also take a listen to his podcast. It's called ServantPT. And I'll put links in the show notes at startatherapypractice.com/86. And be sure to connect with me, Facebook and Instagram at Start a Therapy Practice. And if you need anything, email me, scott@startatherapypractice.com. All right, until next time, Godspeed to you and your practice.